from Iran. What's happening in Iran? Well, guys, Iran has been sanctioned, right? For those who have been following, you already know that Iran was sanctioned this week. In fact, it started to take effect yesterday, right? The new sanctions against Iran, now the UN sanctions. In other words, that 2015 agreement that Iran had established with the world, right? The nuclear agreement, it no longer applies. Total sanctions from all UN members against Iran. Of course, China and Russia will continue helping Iran behind the scenes. But China already has big problems with Taiwan. It's suffering from US tariffs, and it has its own issues to deal with. Russia is at war with Ukraine. So these two countries will do little to stop the final fall of the Ayatollah's regime in Iran. Well, along those lines, Israel is starting to prepare for an Iranian attack amid new sanctions that have been imposed, right? The snapback, right? On Iran. With the snapback clause now in effect and new economic sanctions imposed on Iran, Israel is preparing for two particularly unstable months with Iran, including the possibility of a miscalculation that could lead Tehran to launch an attack on Israel. The concern is that Iran, like a wounded animal, might misinterpret Israel or try to shoot in all directions, literally, given its situation. Will we see direct war with Iran in the coming days? Well, certainly, this will also be addressed in that meeting between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. Why? Iran is now sanctioned by all countries. The end of the Ayatollah's regime has been definitively declared. And unlike Gaza, where there was a motion from many countries recognizing the Palestinian state, no one cares about what happens in Iran, because Iran really is an evil regime. Iran commits evil acts all over the world. There isn't a single country that stands up to defend Iran, not even Russia or China. None of them stood up at the UN to oppose or veto the snapback sanctions, right? Yeah, regarding Iran now in the last UN vote. Not even Russia or China. It's the fall of the Ayatollah's regime. They say this has already been negotiated. Putin. Putin left Syria, left the Middle East, and Trump, then comes the conspiracy theory, would hand over Ukraine to the Russians. Well, that's not exactly what we're seeing happening, because Trump sent, or authorized the Ukrainians even, to respond now inside Russian territory. But we're seeing that no one is coming to the Ayatollah's aid. No one is coming to Iran's aid. And those of you following me, do you think we will have a new phase of this war? Shemuel, I personally believe that after the Gaza issue, right? After Hamas returns the hostages or is completely destroyed, we will have a war with Iran. Or even before that, if an attack from Iran is detected, then Israel would carry out a preemptive strike against Iran, just as it has done before. Remember that? Look, pay attention. Last week it happened exactly in the week when Israel attacked Iran on June 13th. The Secretary of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, comes and announces that Iran is once again just weeks away from having uranium enriched to 90%, which is the level needed for nuclear war. For a nuclear bomb, a nuclear device. Obviously, Iran having uranium at 90%, just uranium at 90%, that doesn't solve everything. Why? You need to have the projectile, the explosion technology. In short, you need to have the bomb. But uranium at 90% is already 90% of the way to having a nuclear bomb. So, similar to what happened before the 12-Day War, again we have the war, the announcement from the International Atomic Energy Agency, and announcements of a new nuclear facility. It's being built by Iran. It's in full swing. And Iran has already stated, even under sanctions, we will continue enriching uranium. Shemuel, Are we on the verge of collapse in the Middle East, or on the verge of resolving this whole war? The meeting between Trump and Netanyahu, he brings exactly that perspective that, well, let's sit down now and resolve what needs to be resolved. Including the Abraham Accords, the expansion of the Abraham Accords, but both the Abraham Accords. Stability there in the Middle East, right? Gaza Strip, all of that also depends on Iran, you see, kept in its proper place.
Yeah, we're seeing the impacts, right, of this war. The boot that's on Hamas's neck, and we also have the American allies there who were in a way affected, right, by the pact. The pact and the military alliance that the United States has with Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. How much of this was planned? About targeting, right, Palestinians, the leaders who operate from Qatar, right, knowing that the Pakistan becomes the new military ally of Saudi Arabia. In other words, if the American bases are installed in Qatar, which hosts the main American base in the Middle East, and also Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, which have American protection, was it the Israeli attack that made Saudi Arabia seek the Pakistani nuclear umbrella? Or was it Iran's moves with its nuclear program that made Saudi Arabia seek this umbrella? With the partnership with Pakistan, since the United States is its main protector, its main ally in the Middle East. The other thing, folks, the topic that is most likely being discussed at the White House is probably sovereignty over the West Bank in Samaria and Judea, which is currently under dispute. Not only the Israeli approval was significant. We're talking about a parliament that approved it almost unanimously, right? It's this guarantee of having military sovereignty in that region, since terrorists moving because of Israel's operation in the Gaza Strip are a security risk that could lead to these terrorist attacks migrating as well. These infiltrations can spread in any direction, and especially to the closest areas to the Israeli border. This is considering the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. So now, yes, the other statement is about this movement, which could also have been a reaction, right, from Iran, which accelerates upon seeing its arch enemy, Saudi Arabia, having the protection of Pakistan. It also starts to prepare itself, right? To prepare itself. Because we had an earthquake, which is a natural disaster that is affecting or that affected Tehran. We have an economic crisis, right? A shortage of resources. And we also have a water crisis and sewage treatment issues, with uprisings and more uprisings from the Iranian population, which makes the regime desperately seek a guarantee. A guarantee like the one Kim Jong-un from North Korea has, that is, to the point of proposing a partnership with the Americans. However, without giving up the protection of its deterrent power, which is what keeps their dictatorship, right? Without any kind of international intervention. So Israel cannot hesitate in the face of the threat. The fact of the nuclear agency, of Iran's capabilities, and the allegation, let's say, that they have activities more than 100 meters underground, right? Below ground as part of their nuclear program. That makes it hard to reach.